Hi, and welcome everyone. We have about 2 minutes before the top of the hour here, so we'll give folks just a couple more minutes to join us before we get started. You have one last chance to go grab a quick cup of coffee or a glass of water before we get started. We'll see you shortly. All right, it is the top of the hour here, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. We will still have some folks joining us, but we should be in good shape to go ahead and kick things off. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where in the world you are, and welcome to today's webinar, 3 Steps to Incident Readiness. My name is Amber Colson, Event Marketing Manager with Newspire. Before we get into today's topic, I'd like to review just a few logistical items with everyone. Today's webinar should last between 30 to 40 minutes with a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. If you do have questions for us, you can certainly send those in at any time during the presentation using the questions or chat panel on your screen. We'll collect those and address those at the end. You'll receive a recording of today's session via email within about 48 hours, usually quite a bit sooner than that, but we will say within 48 hours. And then some of you who are joining us today will be lucky enough to qualify to win a free coffee voucher for being one of the first to sign up and then attend today's presentation. If you are a winner of one of those vouchers, you can expect to see an email from me between now and Monday. So good luck and stay tuned for that. I would now like to introduce you to today's speaker, my colleague and friend, Jerry Wynn. Jerry's the Director of Threat Intelligence and Rapid Response here at Newspire. In addition to having some of the absolute best cybersecurity stories I've heard, he's led the Marine Corps Computer Emergency Response Team, as well as served in cybersecurity leadership roles for numerous organizations. With that, Jerry, over to you. And Jerry, you are still on mute.
That is the theme of the year. Sorry about that, everybody. Thank you, Amber, for that introduction. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about incident readiness. So how I treat incident readiness, is, imagine, you're on the football field. You're on defense. It's other teams' ball. It's 4th and 1. We have a 4-point lead. They line up in a T formation. The tight end goes in motion. And immediately we're thinking, what does that mean? All right, it's probably going to be a run. It's probably going to be a belly run of sorts right up the gut. So as a defensive player, we want to sniff that out, put 8 in the box to stop the run, or force an audible and fall, or we force the quarterback to audible, change the play. We fall back in a zone defense, and we cover short routes and the flat. And then we prevent the play from being successful. So that's how incident readiness. That's how we should treat incident readiness as far as the cybersecurity side. So hi, my name is Jerry Wynn, and I lead the Threat Intel and Rapid Response Services here at Newspire. So how do I know all of those football things, right? I know somebody's asking that question, or somebody thinks like, who's this guy and how does he know about football? Well, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express a couple of years ago, And I play Madden 2020 religiously, so I'm an expert. Just kidding. Uh, so I've been leading instant response engagements for a good amount of time now. I think my first one was probably in 2003 for the Marine Corps. And there's been lots of lessons learned, lots of things that I've observed, my teams have observed. And the key themes that we always run into when we're responding to an incident on not how to prevent an incident from happening, but how to prepare for one. Right. And after you prepare for it, how do you practice that? And then finally, how do you test that? So today's agenda, we're going to go through exactly that: preparing, practicing, and testing. We want to make sure we have a good game plan. We want to make sure we practice that game plan, and ultimately, we want to make sure we test that game plan. Right. I had an incident once where we came in. The customer gave us a call Friday afternoon, 4:30 p.m. Jerry and team, we have an issue. We're losing data. We need your help. So we fly in. We're boots on the ground. Late Friday night, we get the debrief from this customer, and it was one of those rare times where they produce, here's how we prepared for these things that can happen to us. Here's our instant response plan. The last time we tested the plan, or the last time we practiced the plan, was X amount of months ago. And then we test it. We test the plan every so often, but we're facing a new challenge here where we weren't ready for this type of activity. But because they did all of those things ahead of time, they had the right people in the room and the right people responding before we actually showed up to to take the investigation to the next step. So, those are the things we're going to talk about today. And of course, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please ask in the questions section here. I'm monitoring that live, and so is Amber. Want to make this as interactive as possible, so I'll answer questions on the fly. If any comes in. All right. So how do we prepare for an incident? All right. We have to create a plan. All right. A good plan involves the right people, the right information, how we gather information, and what do we know about our environment. Let's put that into the plan. For example, we have X amount of firewalls. We need to uh, get them updated or whatnot. Make that part of the plan. So that way there's at least infrastructure information in there. We need to understand the threat landscape. Which leads to the third item there: outlining and reviewing, or I'm sorry, outline and review your incident playbooks according to that threat landscape. One of the things we want to avoid is boiling the ocean. All right, so let's go back to the plan first before we deep dive everything. So in the plan, we want to make sure it's scoped properly. Who's responsible in the plan? What are they responsible for? For example, I saw a really good incident response plan once, where the scope was identified in a very clear manner that the scope is only for data or digital assets within the organization. And if it involves things outside of that scope, they referenced a bigger incident response plan for the entire enterprise. And I thought that was a very unique way of doing it, where a cybersecurity incident response plan was defined and it was also fed into the bigger enterprise incident response plan. That showed that when the author of this plan was writing the plan, they involved additional people in creating that plan. One of the worst things I see when we talk about an incident response plan is that a cybersecurity professional, excuse me, with all of their good intentions, wrote this plan but didn't involve anyone outside of it. So when the plan needed to be enacted, nobody actually knew what to do besides the cybersecurity team. Well, as we all know, and we read the news, we see all the cybersecurity incidents, events, or whatnot happening in the world. It's more than just a cybersecurity team now that is involved. we have legal involved, we have HR involved, we definitely have IT operations involved. So those folks should at least be aware of the plan and or have direct input into the plan. Right. And the plan needs to not only address roles and responsibilities, key players, who to call, having a call roster. It should also address the threat landscape. And it's a living document. It's definitely not a one and done document. It's a living document. As your threat landscape changes, the plans need to change as well. And that leads to number three with the playbooks. So for example, in the past couple of months, we've had some major cybersecurity events that impacted the entire industry. One of them being a supply chain event. We should have a playbook in the response plan that addresses that. If somebody else is compromised, how does that impact us? How do we react? What's our playbook for that? Who do we call? Those are the things that makes a good incident response plan, and it helps you prepare and be ready for an incident when it does happen. Excuse me. All right. So we just created a plan. Fantastic. Right. So let's practice. Let's practice for an incident. Let's don't be afraid of technical assessments. Right. In every organization, I guarantee you there's somebody in an organization that's more than willing to volunteer to test. Whether you want an internal test or an external test. One of the things we want to test is permissions. Going back to that supply chain event. If we wanted to test for that, say the threat actor does successfully compromise a system, what levels of access does that system have? Does that system really need a domain administrative account to do its job? So when we're conducting technical assessments, we could identify these things, and we could also help with configuring your alerts, taking a holistic view of your entire cybersecurity tool stack and testing that, figuring out if the right alerts are popping off. Are they notifying the right people? Is your security operations center or a SOC responding appropriately? So those are some good benefits there of a technical assessment. And then do scenario-based testing. Not all testing of cybersecurity has to be a technical exercise, right? And one way to do a non-technical exercise is social engineering. We get social engineered every day with phishing emails, text messages, and the best of us fall for it. A couple of months ago, I was expecting a delivery from UPS. I signed up for the UPS alerts via text messaging, email, etc. On the day of delivery, I get a text message from UPS. Yeah, for detailed tracking, click on this link, you get detailed tracking. I put my phone down, I walk away, I come back, and one of my roommates, happened to look at my phone. She wanted to help me track the package, so she actually clicked on the link. Obviously, it was not obviously to her, but it was a spam link. So it happens to all of us. I had to make some remediation efforts. I had to do instant response on my own phone. At the time, and the adversary is getting smarter and smarter. So we have to get our users used to going up against smart adversaries. But one of the ways that I always liked, another quick story here, is show the impact to the user instead of just showing them the wrong. I see lots of great user awareness training programs. I see lots of great phishing email training awareness programs. And I see the congratulations, you submitted the right to the right email box for spam. You've passed the test. And then I've also seen the please go to this link for more training, and I think that's still a great approach and it's needed. However, I had one of my friends, she worked at a nonprofit, very small organization, So this may or may not scale, but I still think it's a worthy story to tell. Is that when she was Fish, she clicked through the link, downloaded the file, double clicked on the zip file, double clicked on the executable, thinking it was a PDF, of an invoice that she was expecting. Obviously things went haywire. They had to remediate her system. But one of the unique things about this organization was they had one of their tier one SOC analysts actually meet her at her in her cubicle and walk her through the impact of what happens or what could have happened if they didn't have the right protection mechanisms in place. They showed her how an attacker could take over her system, how they could steal things, how they could install a keylogger, etc. And it really resonated with her. It heightened her awareness, and that I thought that was a very unique approach to security awareness training. Along with all the proactiveness, showing on users the impact, I think was super helpful. Of course, I get a call immediately after all of this, her telling me this story, and she was actually very excited to learn more about cybersecurity versus just a generic messaging. Right. So again, a very unique approach, but not. But going back to a non-technical assessment, I've done social engineering exercises before, where we make phone calls to customers. We're IT, we need to log in, give us your information. 9 out of 10 times we were successful. So I think having a hybrid approach of not only doing a non-technical assessment but tying in user awareness training at the same time, it will definitely help prepare for an incident. It'll help the users prepare for an incident. Make it real for them. Kind of like my friend at the nonprofit. It was very real. So recommendation here, when you do your security awareness training for, if there's any repeat, the folks that struggle with the exercises, sit them down, show them, walk them through what could potentially happen. And then another non-technical exercise that we could do is called the tabletop exercise, where we get everybody in a room and we essentially play the game. Right? What happens when this scenario plays out? How do we react to the plan? Does everybody know about the plan? In a room environment like that where it's high stakes. For example, one of the scenarios I always like to use is data exposure. If somebody has hacked into the system, they've stolen data, they've threatened to release the data to the internet. How to react to this. And in a scenario like this, it really shines through on if your plan works. And it's not a pass or fail for the plan, it's to help improve the plan. To be honest, that should be the goal of a tabletop exercise, is to improve the plan and to show folks the impact, and also to to let people react to something like this. It's because if they're reacting to a cybersecurity incident for the first time, it's never a good thing. We want to make sure we just practice reacting for it. We can't cover all bases, but however, or I'm sorry, all bases as far as scenario goes. But to understand how people react is key in conducting a tabletop exercise. And also it helps get outsider perspective on your plan. When you're doing the tabletop exercise, and involve folks from the legal team, HR team, marketing. As we read more and more about these major cybersecurity incidents, marketing and PR play a huge role, and to expose those types of folks in a controlled environment helps them practice their plan as well. So we're getting outside perspective into multiple plans. And as cybersecurity professionals, we now get to see what everybody else's crisis plans look like, and we can actually make an impact on that as well. So testing instant readiness. Well, one of the easier things to do is vulnerability scanning. The scanning part's the easy part, All right, let's talk about what to do after the scan. We need to ensure we have the right program in place to understand the scanning results, right? Understand, what it means, the impact to the organization. As a as a consultant, when I checked in to customers when we're developing a plan for them, lots of folks don't know what to do with the scan results. As a matter of fact, it's too much information for cybersecurity managers most times, where the vulnerability management team hands over a report. There's hundreds, sometimes thousands of vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. And there's not a program in place to prioritize, schedule those, make sure they're patched. Defining what gets patched immediately or within a 10-day window, for example, versus what gets patched in a 30, 60, 90-day window. All right, so having the right plan, the right vulnerability program in place, understanding the vulnerabilities, is a key factor here. Lots of organizations that I respond to, they do vulnerability scanning, they do patching as they can. However, lots of the incidents that I respond to is a direct result of a vulnerability that sat out there that organizations didn't know about. A good example is we responded recently to an organization. It was a ransomware type of attack, and we asked for a vulnerability report. They showed us a vulnerability report. Me and the team, we looked at it. We looked at the log data that we had. Like these things just don't add up. There's something missing. So we asked, in addition to the vulnerability report, if there's network diagrams or whatnot. There wasn't. However, we did some research into the organization, and we had found out that one of their servers that was in the vulnerability report, that was supposed to be behind a firewall, wasn't behind a firewall. And not only was it not behind a firewall, it actually had port 3389 open, which is remote desktop, to the internet. So the system was getting hammered. So now we have information, right? We have the host. We know that it's not out. We know that it's not inside of any security boundaries. It was just sitting outside. So we go through the vulnerability report, and we find that it hadn't been patched in a few years. As a matter of fact, it was vulnerable to a multitude of remote desktop vulnerabilities that was being leveraged by the threat actors to move into the network. So going back to our point here of understanding your vulnerabilities, make sure you understand your scans. Make sure you understand the reports. Make sure you know how to action those reports. Have a program in place to define the criticals, the highs, the mediums, the lows, and the patching cadence of them. That way you can understand what can be fixed quickly and where to prioritize your efforts. Going back to the original scenario of, here's 1,000 vulnerabilities this month. Jerry, have fun. Right. So with a program in place, I can go through the report, identify, the criticals, and then understand from an architecture standpoint, out of those criticals, which ones are most likely to be exploited. And those are the ones we should patch first. Right. That's an example of what a vulnerability program looks like. And then finally, testing testing the program itself. So we have these vulnerabilities. We have a list of vulnerabilities now. Let's test it. Let's do a penetration test to test the vulnerabilities. The penetration test should once make sure or validate the vulnerability. Does that vulnerability actually exist in the environment? I run into false positives in vulnerability scan results all the time. So let's test it. And if the vulnerabilities do exist, did it alert anybody when we tested them, when we try to validate them? Right. So your security team, your security operations center, somebody should get an alert when a penetration test is happening. Right. Proactively testing your vulnerabilities. If you don't, your attackers are definitely testing them. Right. This picture here on the slide, it's I'm not a fan of Coach Belichick here, but boy, do I respect him. And and one of the things I admire about Coach Belichick, for those from the New England area, welcome. You're welcome. But he plays the game to win, right? And that's why he's so successful. He understands the game. So if we take that same approach with cybersecurity, understanding the game, understanding our threat actors, understanding our risk exposure, and it starts with the basics. It starts with everybody knowing what their job is in their cybersecurity roles and responsibilities. It starts with everybody executing their job properly, and then using your tools to aid in that execution. All right, so we've talked about preparing, practice, and testing. We want to prepare for the worst, even as we hope for the best. And preparation is all about getting the right documents in place, the right processes in place. I can't stress that enough. Practice. The practice what you've prepared for. Go back, look at all of your playbooks. Are they relevant? Do they address the current threat landscape? Going back to the supply chain issue, do you have a playbook for that? Have do you have a research team that can research the threat landscape for you? And understand and have them prepare the playbooks for you so you understand fully what needs to happen when X event happens. Where during my time as an incident responder, in the heyday, I'd say in roughly 2007ish, when I was engaging in incident response on the commercial side of the house, it was we had a playbook for responding because every week we were getting called out for the same adversary doing the same things to small credit unions. So our playbook was look for uh, a.bat, which was a batch script that the threat actors were using to conduct SQL injection. They would get into a financial institution's network, run this batch script, do some SQL injection, repopulate XP command shell on Microsoft SQL servers, and then have remote access. So our playbook was to look for that activity. And that's a good way to look at the playbooks. Kind of being on offense, but uh, b- you still have a defensive mindset. All right, and then practice what you prepare for. No, it helps you make a stronger security program. Going back to what we talked about earlier there, you know, don't focus on technical on how to practice for things from a technical perspective. Make sure the human element is still involved. As we scale, like I said earlier, different organizations scale and mature differently in their cybersecurity program. For those smaller programs, it's good to start with the user. you know Practice and prepare with the users. At the end of the day, I truly believe the user is the first line of defense, and if they don't know what's going on or they don't understand the impact of answering yes to an email or clicking on a link, answering the phone, handing over their credentials to somebody that claims that they're from IT, help them understand the impact of that. And as your security program matures, you can start automating that. You can hold more trainings for wider audiences, making impacts. And then finally, we want to test your incident readiness regularly. To ensure a fast and successful response. I truly believe you can't prevent everything. but being prepared for a lot of things is better than trying to prevent everything. And when we test our instant readiness, it's tabletop exercises, penetration testing, red teaming, or whatnot. It should test soup to nuts, left to right, all of your cybersecurity controls. We should allow that to happen, right? I've responded to plenty of organizations that were isolated, or we didn't have time, operational commitments, skill sets, etc. That didn't allow for the full scope testing to happen. And we completely understand that, but we also encourage our customers to find a way to at least test sections of that at any given point of time in a year, or throughout the year, rather. One of the more mature programs that I've seen, they actually afforded their cybersecurity team to either do it in-house or contract out a red team exercise, where in order to test the full-blown cybersecurity program and the health of the organization itself, the rules of engagement were nobody knows about the tests. A red team was hired. They have 6 weeks to do whatever it takes to steal or to accomplish an objective. Most of the time, it's steal data or plant flags, or get to the CEO's email and show proof that we could replicate the email, things like that. And going along that test and seeing from the inside, seeing how people respond to the plan, how people made improvements to the plan as the red team was operating. It highlighted lots of areas of improvement, lots of areas of, hey, we did good here. And at the end of the day, it's preparing you. We always go back to the old mantra of it's not if anymore, it's when it happens. All right, so going to pause here for questions, but before I do jump to questions, wanted to mention that next week's webinar, my colleagues Dan Davis and Brad Wolf, they're going to go a little bit deeper into a cybersecurity plan. They're going to be talking about layered defense. Or I like to say, how many layers does it take to get to the center of cybersecurity? I think that's going to be one of their themes next week. Pretty excited about. Sorry, Amanda. Or Amber. Sorry, Amber. Jumping ahead, but yeah. So that's what's coming. That's what's coming soon. But I'll pause here for any questions or any comments or anything we want to discuss.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry. And no worries there. I just helped advance that one slide for you, and not a problem at all. As Jerry mentioned, we do have a couple upcoming webinars. We have our Building a Multi-Layered Cybersecurity Defense on April 22nd. We have a really fun castle analogy, and bets are on as to whether or not I'm going to wear a knight costume for that webinar. So you'll have to tune in to find out, but that could be a fun addition. And then on May 17th, Newspire has some exciting announcements about the future of cybersecurity. So I do encourage you to check out that webinar as well. As far as questions, we do have one that's come in so far. So Jerry, a little bit of what you talked about today seemed to be on maybe a more basic level. And that's no offense to you, but some of the strategies and tips you shared were perhaps a little bit more basic. So can you comment, why you're addressing incident readiness at this level?
Sure thing. But before I jump to that, I wanted to give a shout out to all my Eastern Washingtonians in the chat. I saw a few registrants from that side of the state. I'm here with you. But yeah, so when I thought about incident readiness, right, and as we were coming up with the slides for this webinar, one of my goals was to actually address the basics. I've been doing incident response for the better part of the last 18 years or so. And every one of the aspects that we've talked about today, I've ran into as late as last week. All right. So every once in a while, it's always good to go back to the basics, get a good refresher before we cycle into the more into the more advanced things, such as the multi-layered cybersecurity defense topic. But it's for me personally as an incident responder, I always like to keep refreshing, keep going back to the basics, improve on the basics. Every program is different. Cybersecurity program is different. Everybody is at a different maturity level. So I always like to go back to the basics. That was the biggest reason why here. There's Trish. Yes, I'm in the Tri-Cities. And to keeping the basics, I always like to refresh up on that. I see it over and over again where it happened because we didn't do X, and X was always, we don't have an incident response plan. We didn't test our environment after we set things up. Lots of organizations I see will set up a phenomenal infrastructure. All the services are running, but nobody tested it. So want to continue pushing security to the left, and in order to do that, we got to go back to the basics. Great question.
Excellent, thank you. And even in your last response, you talked quite a bit about having an incident response plan and how valuable that was. So if somebody's with a company that maybe doesn't have that in place, they haven't revisited it in a while, do you have any suggestions on tools that you can use to get started?
Yes, lots of tools. If you don't have an incident response plan, plenty of tools out there. I've seen and been a part of the authorship of many of these plans. We actually have one on our website based off of a lot of the best practices that I've seen to create or to start an incident response plan. It's a great framework to just get you started. We also included some run books, some sample run books in there for you to get started on what a run book or a playbook looks like. And it's absolutely free. I can't promise that a salesperson may or may not get in touch. I don't think it's behind that wall. Amber, keep me honest there, but it's absolutely free. Please go grab it if you don't have an incident response plan, or you just want to see what one looks like, or see some language that might help out with your incident response plan. I kept it at a very high level, these are the things I've seen that have worked before. Definitely work through your organization and how their documents and their plans look like, adapt to it, but it's a good starting point there.
Perfect, thank you. And I did pop a link to that in the chat if anybody's interested in downloading that. All right, well, I am not seeing any other questions come through today. I do thank everybody for joining us. As we mentioned, we have a couple other webinars coming up. I encourage you to register for those. The one on April 22nd, the first 20 registrants can qualify for a free lunch, and there are some fun prizes for the one on May 17th as well. So lots of good content and other fun incentives for hanging out with us.
Actually, before we sign off, Amber, I'm going to throw you a wrench in your system here. But if anybody if anybody in chat, if there's a topic you want to hear from an incident responder's perspective, please let us know. I'm more than happy. My team is more than happy, to just talk shop, share a story, lessons learned, or any advanced incident response topics we want to talk about. We're very open to these webinars. We'll spin one up fairly quickly. Please let us know.
Agreed. Yes, if you do have ideas or suggestions for content, please reach out to us. We're here to help you. We really want to make sure that you're getting value out of these and that you're getting information that you can put to use. So if there is not anything more today, if you do think of questions or ideas later, you can always email us at webinars@newspire.com. I'm the friendly face behind that. I'm not trying to sell you anything, so I'd be more than happy to help you. And with that, I think we are good for today. Jerry, any last closing thoughts?
No last closing thoughts. I think we're good. Keep on keeping on. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.